Hello, and welcome back to Void Whispers. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy the Void Whispers that creep in during the dead of night, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away. And let's begin. Story 1. It started so slowly that I did not understand what was happening until I was already trapped inside it. You know that old story about the frog placed in cool water while the heat is turned up little by little? The frog stays because the change happens too slowly to notice. By the time the water starts to boil, it is already too weak to escape. That is what happened to me. Nothing strange happened at first. There was no sudden flash from the television, no mysterious voice calling my name, and no shadowy figure standing behind me. My life simply continued as it always had, and that was probably why I failed to notice the danger. I had a job that drained me in every possible way. It was not physically difficult, but by the end of each shift, my mind felt scraped empty. I spent all day dealing with angry people, pointless meetings, impossible deadlines, and managers who acted as though every small mistake could destroy the entire company. By the time I reached home, I usually had no energy left for anything meaningful. Most evenings followed the same routine. I would enter my apartment, drop my bag beside the door, kick off my shoes, and make myself something quick to eat. Sometimes I heated soup. Sometimes I cooked noodles or put a frozen meal in the microwave. If I was especially tired, I ordered food. Then I would sit on the couch and turn on the television. I knew it was not the most productive way to spend my time. I could have exercised, read books, learned a new skill, or gone out to meet people. But I had never been an ambitious person. I had a few hobbies, but I saved those for the weekends, when I had enough energy to enjoy them. Weeknights were for surviving. I did not care what was playing on the television. Sitcoms, crime shows, cooking competitions, documentaries, game shows, it all became the same soft background noise. The stories were easy to understand. The characters explained what they were feeling. Problems appeared and were solved before the credits rolled. It was comforting because it required nothing from me. The first night I noticed something was wrong began like any other. Work had been worse than usual. 2 people had called in sick, which meant the rest of us had to cover their duties. My boss spent most of the day walking around the office, asking why tasks were taking so long while doing nothing to help. When I finally got home, I felt as though someone had filled my skull with wet sand. I made a simple dinner, opened a bottle of beer, and sat down on the couch. I was not a heavy drinker. I might have a few drinks with friends once or twice a month, but I rarely drank alone. That evening, though, I felt I had earned it. The television was already tuned to some familiar channel. A show was playing, though I could not tell you what it was called. There were people sitting in a bright living room, talking and laughing. One of them said something, and the audience laughed. Another person entered through a door, and the audience laughed again. I remember taking a drink from my beer. After that, everything became soft. The voices on the screen lost their meaning. I could still hear every word, but they did not seem connected. The sounds brushed against my thoughts and slid away before I could understand them. The faces on the television seemed familiar, though I was certain I had never seen them before. I watched another scene, then another. The next thing I knew, I was waking up on the couch. My hand was still wrapped loosely around the neck of the empty beer bottle. My mouth felt dry, and one side of my face had been pressed against the couch cushion, long enough to leave a deep mark in my skin. For a few seconds, I did not know where I was. The television was still on. A morning news program played quietly across the room. The curtains were glowing with pale daylight, and my neck hurt when I tried to sit up. My joints cracked as I moved. Every muscle felt stiff. I looked at the time and realized I still had enough time to shower before work, though not much. I was surprised that one beer had knocked me out. But I told myself it had probably been the combination of alcohol and exhaustion. I'd been tired before I sat down. Falling asleep on the couch was not unusual. At least that was what I told myself. I showered, changed my clothes, and left for work. The entire day was miserable. My eyes felt heavy, and my thoughts moved slowly. I made simple mistakes. I forgot to send an email. I entered the wrong numbers into a report. During one meeting, my boss asked me a question, and I stared at him for several seconds because I had not realized he was speaking to me. I drank 2 cups of coffee and an energy drink, but nothing helped. It felt as though I were walking through deep water. By the time I returned home, I was completely exhausted. I had planned to eat something and go straight to bed. The moment I opened my apartment door, I noticed that the television was on. The room was dark except for the pale light coming from the screen. I stood in the doorway for a moment, staring at it. I remembered waking up with the television playing that morning. I thought I had turned it off before leaving, but I was not completely sure. I had been rushing. It was possible that I had forgotten. That explanation seemed reasonable enough. I dropped my bag near the door and walked into the living room. My body felt too heavy to carry any farther, and before I could think better of it, I sat down on the couch. The cushions seemed to pull me in. I removed my shoes with my feet and took out my phone. Cooking felt impossible, so I ordered food from a nearby restaurant. While I waited, I watched the television. It was already on, after all. I do not remember the delivery arriving. I do not remember opening the door. I do not remember eating. The next morning, I woke on the couch again. Empty takeout boxes covered the coffee table. There was a plastic cup on the floor, and a paper bag had fallen beside my feet. The television was still playing. My body hurt even more than it had the previous morning. I grabbed my phone and checked the time. I was almost late. I jumped to my feet, swearing as pain shot through my back. My heart began racing, and the sudden rush of panic gave me enough energy to move. There was no time to shower. There was barely enough time to brush my teeth and change my shirt. I looked at the takeout boxes. They were empty, so I did not think they would attract bugs. I could clean them when I returned home. Before I left, I stood in front of the television and pressed the power button on the remote. The screen went black. I stared at it for a few seconds, making sure it stayed off. Then I rushed out. I used public transportation to get to work, which meant I did not have to worry about driving. I sat near the back of the train and tried to keep my eyes open. As the train moved, I searched my bag for a piece of gum. I did not want to arrive at the office smelling like old takeout. That was when I realized I could not remember what I had eaten. I looked down at my hands as if they might somehow tell me. I knew food had been delivered because I had seen the empty containers. I remembered ordering it. But I could not remember the knock at the door, the delivery driver, or the taste of the meal. I could not even remember what restaurant it came from. The memory simply stopped after I sat down. It seemed impossible that I could be so tired from one bad night of sleep that I had lost several hours. Still, I could not think of another explanation. I told myself I was overworked. The weekend was coming. I would clean the apartment, sleep properly, and return to normal. That thought comforted me for most of the day. Work passed in a blur. My arms and legs felt heavy, but my head felt strangely light, as though it were floating above my body. People spoke to me, and I answered automatically. I completed tasks without remembering how. At one point, I looked at the clock and realized nearly 3 hours had passed since I last checked it. I almost missed my train home because I forgot to clock out. When I reached my apartment, everything was exactly as I had left it. The television was off. The takeout boxes remained on the table. The room smelled faintly of old food and stale air. I forced myself to clean. It took more effort than it should have. I gathered the boxes and bags, tied them inside a garbage bag, and carried it to the trash chute at the end of the hall. When I returned, the apartment felt too quiet. I sat down on the couch. I should have gone directly to bed, but my body was tense from work. I thought a little television might help me relax. Only 20 minutes, I told myself. I picked up the remote and turned it on. The screen filled the room with blue light. I do not know what I watched. I remember people talking. I remember bright colors and movement. I remember music playing softly behind a scene. Then I became aware of birds singing outside. At first, I thought the sound was coming from the television. I looked toward the window. Morning light was shining through the blinds. I stared at it, confused. The room had been dark only moments earlier. I was certain of it. I had barely sat down. I checked the time. The entire night had passed. I had not fallen asleep. At least I did not think I had. I remembered sitting there, watching the screen. It felt like only a few minutes. A cold feeling moved through me. I tried to laugh it off, but the sound that came from my mouth was weak. I told myself that extreme exhaustion could affect memory and the sense of time. People sometimes drove long distances without remembering the trip. They entered rooms and forgot why they were there. Surely this was something similar. What I really needed was rest. A vacation would be even better. But sleep was all I could manage for now. I stood and turned off the television. The screen went black. Only then did I notice that I was still wearing my work clothes. My shirt was wrinkled, and my socks felt damp. I smelled like sweat and old food. I went into my bedroom and closed the blinds. Even though the sun was rising, I planned to sleep for as long as possible. And before getting into bed, I decided to drink some water. The kitchen was on the other side of the living room, so I had to pass the couch again. The television was on. I stopped walking. For several seconds, I simply stared. The room was filled with the same pale blue light as before. I knew I had turned it off. I remembered pointing the remote at it. I remembered watching the image disappear. I remembered the small click that came from the speakers. Yet there it was, playing again. I thought there might be an electrical problem. A damaged wire or faulty control board could cause a television to turn on by itself. That explanation made sense. I would call someone after I slept. The remote was on the coffee table, surrounded by several empty takeout containers. I frowned. I had thrown those away. I remembered placing them inside the garbage bag and carrying them down the hall. These looked exactly the same. For a moment, I wondered if I had ordered another meal and forgotten about it. But when would I have done that? I had spent the entire night sitting on the couch. Had I eaten without knowing? I stepped closer and reached for the remote. I wanted to turn off the television and go to bed. My fingers touched the remote. Something on the screen caught my attention. I could not tell you what it was. There was no shocking image, no frightening face, no message written across the screen. It was only a program. People were talking in a room. One person walked across the screen. Another sat in a chair. The camera angle changed. That was all. Yet I could not look away. I stood there with the remote in my hand. I told myself to press the button. My thumb rested above it, but it would not move. The show continued. I watched. I do not know how long I remained standing. At some point, I sat down, though I do not remember choosing to do it. I ordered more food because cooking would have required me to look away. The delivery arrived. I must have opened the door and paid for it, but I remember none of those things. I only remember eating while staring at the screen. The food filled my stomach, but it had no taste. More containers appeared on the table. Then more. The floor became covered with bags, cartons, napkins, and cups. I watched and ate. I watched and slept. I watched while waking. I watched while ordering more food. I watched until time stopped feeling like time. Monday arrived. I knew it was Monday because my boss called. My phone vibrated beside me. The sound seemed distant, like something happening in another apartment. Without looking away from the television, I reached for it. My fingers moved across the screen until I answered. My boss asked where I was. I told him I was sick. My voice sounded strange. It was dry and rough, as though I had not spoken for days. Perhaps I had not. He asked several questions, but I cannot remember them. I gave short answers without understanding what I was saying. All of my attention remained fixed on the television. I did not realize the call had ended until I heard a quiet tone from the phone. The longer I watched, the harder it became to look away. The harder it became to look away, the longer I watched. It formed a circle that grew tighter around me. My eyes began to hurt. At first, it was only a mild burning. I had been staring at the screen for too long and needed to blink. I tried. Nothing happened. I tried again. The muscles around my eyes tightened, but my eyelids remained open. Fear slowly entered my mind. I forced myself to blink as hard as I could. My eyes did not close. I could feel every muscle straining. My face trembled with the effort, but my eyelids remained pulled apart. I could not blink. Panic exploded through me. The voices from the television became distant beneath the sound of my heartbeat. Blood rushed loudly in my ears. What was happening? My eyes burned as though hot sand had been poured into them. My body forced tears to the surface, trying to protect them. My vision became watery and blurred, but even through the tears, I continued staring at the glowing screen. I tried to turn my head. It would not move. I tried to lift my arm and cover my eyes. My arm remained in my lap. I could still feel my body, but it no longer obeyed me. The screen held my gaze as tightly as a hand around my throat. I told myself someone would come. My boss would call again. A co-worker might visit. A friend would notice I had disappeared. Someone would find me, turn off the television, and end whatever was happening. That hope was the only thing that kept me from completely losing my mind. I watched the light outside the window change through the edge of my vision. Day became night. Night became day. Tuesday. I thought it was Tuesday. Around midday, someone knocked on my door. The sound filled me with desperate hope. I tried to shout. Only a faint breath escaped my mouth. The muscles in my throat had become tight and useless. I could breathe, but I could not form words. The person knocked again. I tried to move my hand toward the door. Nothing happened. My body sat on the couch like a dead thing. The knocking eventually stopped. My phone began ringing. It rang again and again, vibrating against the cushion. I could not look toward it. I tried to move my fingers, hoping I could feel around and answer without seeing it. My fingers would not move. Eventually, the phone stopped ringing. Later, it rang again, then again. After a while, the calls went directly to voicemail. The voicemail box filled. Sometime after that, the battery died. I remained trapped. I could not eat. I could not drink. I could not use the bathroom. All I could do was watch. Another day passed, maybe two. Dark spots began appearing in my vision. They floated across the screen like insects. Sometimes they became so thick that I could barely see anything. Still, I watched. Sleep changed into something strange. I no longer closed my eyes or became fully unconscious. Instead, I seemed to disappear for brief periods. One moment I was aware of the television, and the next I had the feeling that time had passed. Nothing looked different. The same light filled the room. The same meaningless voices came from the speakers. But somehow hours or days had vanished. I began to lose my sense of how long I'd been there. Sometimes I thought I heard someone knocking again. Other times I heard footsteps in the hallway or voices near my door. Whenever sounds came from outside the apartment, the television became louder. The volume rose just enough to cover them. The speech remained unclear. I could hear people talking. But the words had no meaning. Their voices blended together into a soft, endless noise. I would have cried if I could. By then, my body had stopped making tears. My eyes felt like burning stones inside my skull. Pain spread through my forehead, cheeks, and jaw. I could feel the surface of my eyes drying and cracking. Yet I continued watching as though nothing were wrong. From the outside, I probably looked calm. I sat in the same position, facing the television like a person enjoying a quiet evening after work. Inside, I was screaming. I wondered why no one had come. I had friends, did I not? I tried to remember their names. Nothing came. I searched my memory for faces, voices, birthdays, conversations. There were people from work. There were a few neighbors I sometimes greeted in the hallway. There were people I followed online and people I had not spoken to in years. But real friends? I could not remember a single one. Had I always been that alone? I had family, but none of them lived nearby. Surely they would become concerned if I stopped answering calls. Someone would contact the police. Someone would check on me. Days passed. No one came. My body became weaker. I could feel hunger at first. It twisted inside my stomach and made me dizzy. After a while, the hunger disappeared. Thirst was worse. My tongue became thick and dry. My lips cracked. Every breath felt rough against my throat. The smell in the room became unbearable. Rotting food sat in open containers. Flies gathered around the garbage. My body had emptied itself where I sat because I could not move. I could smell my own waste. Still, the television continued playing. The programs changed, but they were all the same. People spoke. People laughed. People moved from one room to another. Occasionally, I thought one of them looked directly at me. Not at the camera. At me. A woman would stop speaking and stare through the screen. A man would turn his head slowly toward me. Their faces remained empty and calm. I could never be sure whether it was truly happening or whether my damaged eyes were creating shapes from the blur. Once, I thought I saw the living room on the television. My living room, the same couch, the same coffee table covered with containers, the same weak blue light. A man sat in the center of the screen. He was thin, filthy, and completely still. For a long time, I did not understand that I was looking at myself. Then the camera moved closer. The version of me on the television opened his mouth. I could not hear what he said. The sound was too unclear, but I could read his lips. He said, "Keep watching." The image changed. A different program began. Maybe that never happened. Maybe it was only a hallucination caused by hunger, dehydration, and fear. That is what the doctors later told me. The thing that finally saved me was not family, friends, or anyone from work. It was my neighbor. The television had been playing loudly for days. The sound continued through every night, and a terrible smell had begun spreading into the hallway. My neighbor complained to the superintendent. At first, they thought I was being careless. Then they became worried that I had died. The superintendent knocked. I heard him calling my name. I tried to answer, but I could not. He opened the door with a master key. I heard him enter. Then I heard him shout. The police and paramedics arrived soon afterward. Even then, I could not look away from the television. Someone stepped in front of me, blocking the screen. For the first time in what felt like forever, the light disappeared. I remember a terrible pressure releasing from inside my head. My body collapsed. Everything went dark. When they found me, I was almost blind. My skin had become thin and pale. My hair was falling out. Several of my teeth were loose. I had lost so much weight that my bones showed beneath my clothes. The waste beneath me had dried and fused my clothing to the couch. Rotting takeout covered the floor. Some boxes were empty. Others were still full. The strange part was that I had eaten enough food to survive for a while. Yet the doctors said I was severely malnourished. I do not know how long I had been sitting there. They told me it had been nearly 3 weeks. That did not feel possible. To me, it had been both a few hours and many years. At the hospital, doctors cleaned me and treated my body. I heard them discussing my condition while they believed I was asleep. They said I had experienced a severe mental breakdown caused by extreme burnout and depression. They said prolonged isolation and lack of sleep had likely caused hallucinations. They treated my eyes, though they warned that the damage might be permanent. The surface of each eye had become badly dehydrated. One doctor said I was lucky not to have lost them completely. Lucky. That word almost made me laugh. After my physical condition became stable, they transferred me to a psychiatric ward. They gave me medication and asked questions. Did I hear voices? Did I see things that were not there? Did I believe the television was speaking to me? Did I want to hurt myself? I told them the truth. The television had trapped me. It had made me watch. It had stopped me from blinking and moving. The doctors wrote notes. They changed my medication. After a while, I realized that telling the truth only made them keep me longer. So I gave them the answers they wanted. I said I understood that the television had not controlled me. I said stress and exhaustion had caused a break from reality. I said I felt safer now. They seemed pleased. Life in the ward is not as bad as you might expect. I receive 3 meals every day. Nurses check on me regularly. I take my medication, attend therapy sessions, and spend time around other patients. I am no longer alone. My eyesight has improved, though everything remains slightly blurred. The doctors say it may continue healing. I sleep in a real bed now. I have clean clothes. I do not have to work. Sometimes I even feel almost normal. The best part is the day room. There are chairs arranged in a half circle. There are puzzles, old magazines, board games, and windows that look out over the hospital courtyard. Mounted high on the wall is a television. At first I avoided it. Whenever someone turned it on, I felt my heart begin to race. I would leave the room or stare at the floor. The staff said that avoiding television would only strengthen my fear. They called it exposure therapy. They encouraged me to sit in the room for a few minutes while the screen was on. They said I needed to teach my brain that it was safe. I started slowly. 5 minutes, then 10, then half an hour. Nothing happened. I could look away whenever I wanted. I could blink. I could stand and leave the room. The doctors said this proved the television had never been the problem. They were wrong. At first, the programs in the day room were normal. News, weather reports, daytime talk shows, and old movies. Then, one afternoon, something changed. A program came on that I did not recognize. I could not tell you its name. I could not tell you who was in it. I could not explain what it was about. The actors spoke in soft, unclear voices. The other patients kept talking and playing cards. The nurses continued walking through the room. No one seemed to notice anything unusual, but I noticed. The colors were familiar. The rhythm of the voices was familiar. The screen gave off the same pale blue light. I felt my body relax. My fear disappeared. For the first time since my rescue, I felt completely calm. I sat in the chair and watched. One of the nurses asked whether I wanted to go to dinner. I told her I would come in a minute. She smiled and left. The room slowly emptied. I stayed where I was. The program continued. My eyes began to burn. I tried to blink. For now, I still can. But it is becoming harder. And tonight, the ward staff are short-handed. They may not notice if I stay in the day room after everyone else has gone to bed. The television is mounted too high for me to reach. The remote is locked inside the nurse's station. The screen is getting brighter. The voices are getting louder. And one of the people on the television has just turned to face me. He looks thin. His hair is falling out. His eyes are wide, dry, and red. He looks exactly like I did when they found me. He has been staring at me for several minutes. Now he is smiling. I cannot hear what he is saying, but I can read his lips. Welcome back. The strange thing is, I am not afraid anymore. I think I have finally understood. The television never wanted to kill me. It only wanted me to keep watching. And this time, I do not think anyone is coming to turn it off. Story 2. The newly built Ramses Warren Ramses II apartment towers stood under the harsh summer sun in the neighborhood of Quaints. Their pale, sand-colored walls and sharp, Egyptian-style design made them look completely different from the older brick buildings surrounding them. The towers were smooth, bright, and almost too clean. From a distance, they looked less like homes and more like enormous monuments built for some forgotten king. Caleb Jones noticed them the first time he passed through the neighborhood. He and his wife, Esther, had moved to New Zork from a small Midwestern town after Caleb accepted a well-paying office job in the city. At first, moving had felt exciting. New Zork seemed full of opportunities, restaurants, theaters, and interesting people. But after a few months, the excitement started to disappear. Their apartment was expensive, cramped, and located in an area neither of them considered safe. The landlord had already raised the rent once and had warned that it would probably increase again. At night, They heard people shouting in the street. Someone had broken into a car outside their building. A woman had been robbed near the corner store. With Esther expecting their first child, those things became harder to ignore. They wanted safety. They wanted access to daycare, good schools and parks. More than anything, they wanted stability. They did not want to spend the next 10 years moving from one rented apartment to another while rents kept climbing. Buying a house was impossible. Even with Caleb's salary, homes in New York cost far more than they could afford. So they began looking at condominiums. Caleb kept returning to the Ramses buildings. Every time he saw them, he pointed them out. They're new, he told Esther. New wiring, new plumbing, better security. We wouldn't have to worry about an old heating system breaking in the middle of winter. Esther never shared his excitement. There was something about the towers that made her uncomfortable. Their flat walls had very few visible windows. Their sharp corners and smooth surfaces made them look artificial, almost unfinished. She could never explain exactly what bothered her. "They feel wrong," she said once. Caleb laughed. "What does that mean?" "I don't know. They just do. You're pregnant. Yesterday you wanted pickles dipped in melted chocolate. That has nothing to do with this. I'm just saying your feelings may not be completely reliable right now." Esther hated when he said things like that, but his practical arguments were difficult to fight. The towers were new. The neighborhood was better than the one they currently lived in. The prices advertised online seemed surprisingly reasonable. Maybe that was what frightened her most. It seemed too good to be true. Esther had recently lost her part-time job, which had made her more suspicious of the city and the people who controlled it. She had been called into her manager's office one afternoon and fired without warning. "I want to make one thing clear, Esty," her manager had said. "I'm not letting you go because you're a woman." Esther had waited, hoping there was more. "I'm letting you go because you're pregnant." She had stared at him. "You can't be serious." "Men don't get pregnant," he replied with a shrug. "That's life." The job had never provided much of their income, but losing it had shown her how quickly people could be discarded. There had been no discussion, no sympathy, and no attempt to find another position for her. One moment she had a job, the next she did not. Caleb told her they would manage. His salary was enough, at least for now. That was how the two of them ended up standing outside the Ramses II building on a Saturday morning, holding hands and looking up. From the sidewalk, the building seemed to stretch forever. Esther leaned back, trying to see the top, but the bright sun made her eyes water. "It looks like a tomb," she said. "It looks modern," Caleb replied. "It looks like a tomb pretending to be modern." And before Caleb could answer, the glass entrance doors opened. A man in a dark suit stepped outside. "Mr. and Mrs. Jones?" Caleb nodded. The man introduced himself as a housing representative. He had a perfect smile, smooth hair, and the kind of calm voice people used in expensive advertisements. "Welcome to Ramses II," he said. "You're going to love what we have to offer." He led them into the lobby. The inside was bright and cool. Tall stone columns stood near the walls. Golden decorations showed birds, eyes, and figures that looked like ancient Egyptian gods. Soft music played from hidden speakers. The representative showed them a gym, a shared workspace, a children's playroom, and several areas where residents could sit and relax. Everything was spotless. After the tour, he brought them into a small office. The room had no windows. Shelves were filled with binders, brochures, and floor plans. A monitor on the wall played a promotional video. At Ramses the Y and Ramses 2, a cheerful voice said, "You don't simply live, you live like a pharaoh." Esther nearly laughed. The representative sat behind a desk and collected their personal information. He asked about Caleb's job, their savings, their current rent, and their future plans. He entered the answers into a computer. "So," he said when he had finished, "what do you think?" "I'm impressed," Caleb admitted. "I'm just not sure we can afford a unit here." The representative smiled. "You may be surprised. We offer extremely competitive financing because everything is managed through our parent company, Cumulus Corporation." "We would need 2 bedrooms," Esther said. "Of course." He opened one of the binders and began turning pages. "And some of the layouts online looked very narrow," Esther continued. "We don't really like the open concept style. Is there anything more traditional?" Caleb nudged her leg beneath the desk. She ignored him. The representative stopped at a page and turned the binder around. "The layouts are what they are," he said. "Most new developments across the city use similar designs. It is what modern buyers prefer." "We don't prefer it," Esther said. His smile did not change, but something cold appeared behind it. "That being said, we do have a 2-bedroom unit that fits your financial range. A Cumulus Corporation would provide the loan under very fair conditions. Your monthly payment would only be slightly higher than your current rent." Caleb leaned forward. "Really? Really? What floor is it on?" Esther asked. The representative stood and picked up a set of keys. "Unit 7, minus 7th floor?" Esther frowned. "Minus 7th? Yes? What does that mean?" The representative opened the office door. "It means the floor is underground, but please do not judge until you have seen the unit." Esther looked at Caleb. The representative continued speaking as he led them toward the elevators. "Both Ramses buildings have 17 floors above ground and 34 below ground. The above-ground apartments are considered deluxe units. Naturally, they are more expensive. The underground levels are designed for younger buyers, new families, and professionals starting their careers." "You built 34 floors underground?" Esther asked. "Yes? Why?" "Because New Zork has limited space." "That sounds like a fire hazard." "The buildings meet every legal requirement." The elevator panel was unlike any Esther had seen before. It had a plus sign, a minus sign, and a number keypad. The representative pressed the minus sign and then 7. The doors closed. The elevator began moving downward. Esther felt her stomach rise. It was strange to enter a tall building and feel the elevator descend instead of climb. As the numbers dropped, she whispered to Caleb, "We are not raising a child underground like insects." "Let's just look at it," he whispered back. The elevator stopped. The hallway outside was wide, quiet, and brightly lit. The walls were cream-colored. The carpet looked untouched. There was no smell of dampness or soil. The representative walked ahead and unlocked a door. "Come in." Esther entered slowly. The apartment was much better than she expected. Everything was new. The floors were smooth. The kitchen had modern appliances and clean white cabinets. Both bedrooms were larger than the ones in their current apartment. There were no stained carpets, cracked walls, moldy corners, or signs of insects. Even the open kitchen and living room did not seem as narrow as she had feared. She stood in the center of the room and turned slowly. I could live here, she thought. It was strange and unnatural, but she could imagine furniture in the living room. She could imagine a crib in the second bedroom. She could imagine herself cooking, while Caleb played with their child nearby. "You cannot even tell you're underground, can you?" the representative asked. Esther hated admitting it, but he was right. The representative showed them how everything worked. The elevator was the main way to enter and leave. In an emergency, residents could use a staircase that led upward to the surface. Fresh air was pulled from outside, filtered, and pushed down through the ventilation system. "It probably smells better than the natural air in Quaints," he joked. The apartment had no real windows. Instead, large digital screens had been placed where windows would normally be. Each screen showed a live video feed from the matching windows of Unit 7 on the plus 7th floor above ground. The image quality was excellent. Esther could see cars moving below, trees bending in the wind, and sunlight reflecting from nearby buildings. "The resolution is so clear that most residents forget the difference," the representative said, "and digital windows never get dirty." He explained that the screens changed with the time of day. If it rained outside, they showed rain. If snow fell, they showed snow. At night, the screens displayed the real city lights. "The main difficulty is psychological," he continued. "Oh, some people fear being underground, just as others fear heights. But the height is not the problem. The fear is the problem." He lowered his voice and smiled at Esther's stomach. "Besides, listen to how quiet it is. Nothing here will disturb the baby." That evening, Caleb and Esther decided to buy the apartment. The paperwork was enormous. There were hundreds of pages, many filled with legal language neither of them understood. Caleb tried to read some of it, but after an hour, the words blurred together. The representative pointed to each place they needed to sign. Standard agreement. Standard financing condition. Standard resident protection policy. Standard property adjustment clause. Esther paused at that one. "What is a property adjustment clause?" The representative answered without hesitation. "It concerns routine maintenance and management procedures." Caleb signed before she could ask anything else. On the first day of the following month, they moved into Unit 7 on the minus 7th floor. For a while, they were happy. Living underground was not ideal, but it became surprisingly easy to forget. The screens were so realistic that Esther sometimes found herself standing in front of them to check the weather. The ventilation system kept the air fresh. The elevator never broke. After a few weeks, the feeling of traveling downward began to seem normal. Going down meant going home. In the fall, Esther gave birth to a boy. They named him Nathaniel, though they usually called him Nate. Those first months were the happiest of their lives. The city seemed less cruel. The dangerous streets and rising rents no longer felt as threatening. They owned their home. They had a beautiful baby. They bought furniture, hung photographs, and decorated Nate's bedroom with painted stars. They watched him grow with the amazement of new parents. He smiled at them. He grabbed their fingers. He laughed for the first time. He said, "Mama." Then he said, "Dada." His laughter filled the underground apartment and made it seem bright even when the screens showed a cloudy day. Still, both Caleb and Esther carried a quiet feeling of shame. When Caleb's co-workers asked where he lived, he said, "The Ramses II building." He never mentioned the floor. Esther made excuses whenever friends wanted to visit. "The baby has been difficult. The place is a mess. Maybe next month." The real reason was that she did not want anyone to know they lived below ground. Despite the beautiful apartment and the realistic screens, part of her felt like a cave dweller raising a child beneath artificial sunlight. A few weeks before Nate's first birthday, something went wrong with Caleb's salary. His employer's payroll system failed to deposit his wages on time. Caleb contacted the payroll department. They told him it was a simple mistake and would soon be corrected. He filled out forms and sent emails. A manager assured him the money was coming. Unfortunately, their loan payment to a Cumulus Corporation was collected automatically. When the company tried to take the monthly payment, there was not enough money in the account. The payment failed. The next morning, Esther woke with Nate beside her and immediately felt that something was wrong. She could not explain it at first. The apartment looked almost normal. The digital windows showed a pale morning sky. The furniture stood where it always had. But the room felt smaller. She sat on the sofa and looked toward the kitchen. The distance seemed shorter than she remembered. The ceiling also appeared slightly lower. There was a sound, too. A soft, steady hum vibrated through the walls. "Caleb," she called. He entered the living room while buttoning his shirt. "What? Does this room seem different?" He looked around. "No. Look carefully." He glanced at the ceiling, the walls, and the furniture. "Seems fine to me. It feels smaller." Caleb sighed. "Esther, I'm already late." There's a humming sound. It's probably the ventilation. I never made that sound before. Caleb ate breakfast, kissed Nate, and took the elevator to work. Esther remained in the apartment. She tried to convince herself that Caleb was right. Perhaps she was tired. Nate had woken several times during the night. Maybe exhaustion was changing her sense of space. But after she put Nate down for his nap, she found a tape measure. She measured the walls, floor, and ceiling. Then she found the original floor plan given to them by Cumulus Corporation. The measurements did not match. The difference was small, but it was real. The apartment had shrunk. When Caleb came home, Esther showed him the numbers. "That's impossible," he said. "I measured carefully." "You may have read the plan wrong. Then measure it yourself." "I have other things to deal with." "Like what?" "My paycheck. I've been talking to payroll all day." "When are they paying you?" The question sounded like an accusation. Caleb's expression changed. "I submitted everything they asked for. The home office manager has to approve an emergency payment. They said it should take a day or two." "Who said that?" "Payroll." "Who exactly?" "I don't remember her name." "Get it in writing." "Why?" "Because something is happening to our home." Caleb threw his hands up. "What do you want me to say? That the walls are closing in because my paycheck was late?" They did not speak for the rest of the evening. The next morning, Caleb left early. Esther was awake and called after him. "If they won't pay you, stop working for them." He closed the door without answering. Esther measured the apartment again. It had become smaller, only by a fraction of an inch, but the change was there. She began recording the measurements in a notebook. Every day, she checked the same walls and the same points on the ceiling. Every day, the apartment lost a little more space. A quarter inch, then another, then another. After a week, even Caleb could see the difference. The sofa was closer to the kitchen counter. The bedroom door no longer opened all the way because the bed was in the way. The hum inside the walls had grown louder. "There has to be a reasonable explanation," Caleb said. "Give me one?" "I don't know." "Call them." "Call who?" "The building management, the Cumulus Corporation, anyone." Caleb found a customer service number in their contract. A pleasant female voice answered immediately. "Thank you for calling Cumulus Corporation. My name is Miriam. How may I serve you today, Mr. Jones?" Caleb paused. "How did you know my name?" "Our system identifies valued customers automatically." "Right. I'm calling because there appears to be a problem with our apartment." I'm sorry to hear that. This is going to sound strange. At Accumulus Corporation, no customer concern is considered strange. Caleb looked at Esther. The dimensions of our unit are getting smaller. Miriam remained silent for a moment. My wife has been measuring the rooms, Caleb continued. We compared them with the original floor plan. The apartment is definitely shrinking. First, I want to thank you for sharing your concern with me, Mr. Jones. Here at Accumulus Corporation, we take all customer concerns seriously. Her voice was warm and sweet, but there was something hidden underneath it. Caleb thought he could hear sadness, like someone speaking while trying not to cry. You do not sound crazy, Miriam said. Isn't that good news? I suppose. You do not sound crazy because your apartment is, in fact, being gradually compressed. Caleb gripped the phone. Compressed? Yes. Why? Miriam typed something. It appears you missed your monthly payment. Your automatic withdrawal failed because there were insufficient funds in your bank account. And because of that, you are shrinking our home? It is not a punishment, Mr. Jones. It is a condition included in your contract. I don't care about the contract. Tell me how to stop it. Make the required payment. We will. It was a payroll mistake. I didn't get paid on time. If you check our history, you'll see we've never missed a payment before. That is correct. My employer is fixing the issue. The home office manager is personally handling it. I am very happy to hear that. Can you stop the compression until we pay? I'm afraid that is impossible. We have a baby. Miriam made a strange sound. At first, Caleb thought the connection was breaking. Then I realized she was crying. I have one too, Mr. Jones, she whispered. The line went dead. Caleb slowly lowered the phone. Esther stood with Nate in her arms. You heard her, Caleb said. Once we pay, it will stop. They're shrinking our home. It's in the contract. Esther handed him the baby and walked away. At work, Caleb continued asking about his missing salary. His manager assured him that it was a temporary glitch. Important people were working on it. He would eventually receive everything he was owed, perhaps even with interest. Caleb considered telling him the truth. My home is shrinking because you haven't paid me. But he imagined the response. The manager would laugh. He might tell Caleb to contact the employee mental health line. He might question whether Caleb was still capable of doing his job. So Caleb remained silent. Another month passed. The apartment became noticeably smaller. A second loan payment failed. Their debt increased. One morning, Esther woke in complete darkness. The main lights were off. The digital windows were black. She reached for Caleb. Wake up. What's wrong? They shut everything off. Nate began moving in his crib. Esther kept her voice low. Call them now. We cannot keep a baby in total darkness. Caleb called Accumulus Corporation. A new voice answered. Good morning, Mr. Jones. My name is Pat. How may I help you? I need to speak with Miriam. I'm afraid Miriam is unavailable. Caleb wondered what that meant. He explained the problem with the lights and screens. I want to thank you for sharing your concern, Pat said. Here at Accumulus Corporation, we take all customer concerns seriously. Caleb closed his eyes. Unfortunately, the loss of lighting is connected to your current debt. You have missed 2 payments. We know that. Can you turn the lights back on? Not without proper authorization. We have a baby. Mr. Jones, do you agree that Accumulus Corporation is acting fairly and within its legal rights under the agreement you signed? What? I am attempting to help you. Do you agree that your current situation is your responsibility? Do you also release Accumulus Corporation from responsibility for any harm connected to the situation? Yes. Fine. Whatever you want. Excellent. The word sounded disturbingly cheerful. I am able to offer you 1 week of lighting and digital window service on credit. Caleb hesitated. More credit meant more debt. Before he could answer, Esther grabbed the phone. Yes, she said. We accept. The lights turned on immediately. The digital windows filled with bright morning sunlight. For one brief moment, Caleb and Esther cheered. They hugged. It felt like a victory. Their shouting woke Nate, who began crying. Esther changed his diaper. Caleb prepared food. The apartment continued shrinking, but daily life moved forward. Less than 2 weeks later, Caleb finally received his salary. The missing money appeared in their bank account, along with a small bonus. A message from the company thanked him for his loyalty and patience. Oh, thank God, Caleb said, staring at his laptop. We have money again. They celebrated by going out for dinner. It was their first pleasant evening in weeks. For a few hours, they pretended everything was normal. Nate sat in a high chair and dropped food on the floor. Esther laughed. Caleb held her hand across the table. The next morning, Esther measured the apartment. She expected the rooms to be growing back to their original size. Instead, they had become even smaller. Caleb, she said. He came into the living room. There is a problem. It may take time to reverse. The screens turned on instantly. That was different. How much did Accumulus take from our bank account? Caleb opened his laptop. His expression changed. All of it. He called customer service again. Pat answered. I can confirm that a payment was received, Pat said. Accumulus Corporation thanks you. Then why is the apartment still shrinking? Because the payment was not enough to satisfy your debt. How much do we owe? I'm afraid that information cannot be provided. Why not? Privacy. It is our account. Accumulus Corporation takes privacy extremely seriously. You would be giving our information to us. Our policy does not recognize that distinction. Then we waive our privacy rights. That is not permitted. Caleb stood and began pacing, though the room was now so cramped that he had only a few steps of open space. Tell me how much we owe so we can pay it. The amount is constantly changing. What does that mean? There are missed payment fees, late payment penalties, penalties for unpaid penalties, compression mechanism charges, delay surcharges, non-compliance fees, breathing rights adjustments, lighting credit, screen credit, and additional account management expenses. Breathing rights adjustments. The air supply to your unit is not free. It was included with the apartment. It is included under normal financial conditions. Caleb pressed a hand against his forehead. So there is no total? The total is calculated continuously by Accumulus Corporation's private debt management algorithm. And you don't know what it is? I do not have access to the exact amount. Who does? The algorithm. Caleb ended the call. He told Esther they needed more money. He asked his boss for a raise. The request went badly. Jones, his boss said, I am disappointed in you. Caleb remained seated across from the desk. I have never asked for a raise before. Exactly. And the first time you do it is immediately after receiving a bonus. The bonus was very small. It was personally approved by the Home Office manager. My responsibilities have increased. You sound greedy. I'm not greedy. Self-interested, then. Cold, almost robotic. Have you ever been tested for psychopathic behavior? Caleb stared at him. You should call the mental health line, his boss continued. That's what it's there for. So the answer is no. I am going to pretend you never made this request. You should be grateful. Caleb left the building. On the way home, he became sick and vomited on the sidewalk. People walked around him without stopping. I'll find another job, he told Esther later. A second job. She said nothing. I'll work nights. She still said nothing. For the next 2 weeks, Caleb searched constantly. He worked during the day and applied for other jobs in the evening. Sometimes he stayed awake late into the night filling out forms. Nate stopped sleeping properly. Esther barely slept too. She and Caleb spoke less each day. It was easier to worry separately than argue together. One morning, Caleb dressed for work and tried to open the apartment door. It would not move. He checked the lock. He unlocked it again. He pulled harder. The door remained closed. He hit it with his hand. Then he punched it until his knuckles hurt. He called a Cumulus Corporation. Good morning, Mr. Jones. Irma speaking. Front door won't open. I want to thank you for sharing your concern. A Cumulus Corporation takes all customer concerns seriously. I cannot leave my apartment. The door is fully functional. It is not. Your access has been restricted because your debt has reached an elevated level. You locked us inside? Under Section 176 of your agreement. Stop reading the contract. Mr. Jones, damaging the door will result in additional charges. How am I supposed to pay if I cannot go to work? There was a pause. I can only help with matters connected to your account, Irma said. Your employment situation is outside my responsibility. Use common sense. I need to work to earn money. I need money to pay you. Let me leave so I can pay. Your debt has already been escalated. How do we survive? Excuse me? How do we buy food? How do we feed our baby? No one is going to starve, Mr. Jones. Then open the door. I can offer another solution. Caleb leaned his forehead against the door. What? You may purchase food and household supplies virtually through Cumulus-owned companies. With what money? Credit. Irma recommended Whole Foods Market for groceries and wellness products. Delivery would be free because Caleb and Esther had been loyal Cumulus customers for more than 1 year. How generous, Esther said from behind him. Caleb turned. She was holding Nate. We're inside a tomb, she said. What choice do we have? They ordered food on credit. Caleb missed work. He received 3 official warnings. Then he was fired under the company's attendance policy. The lights went out again. The digital windows turned black. The compression accelerated. The walls began moving fast enough for Esther to notice changes each day. Kitchen cabinets cracked under the pressure. Tiles split in the bathroom. Furniture had to be broken apart because there was no longer enough room for it. The bedroom became exactly the size of the bed. Then it became smaller. The ceiling dropped until Caleb had to bend forward. Later, Esther could no longer stand either. They crawled from one part of the apartment to another. Hours and days became difficult to track. Without sunlight or normal routines, time lost meaning. Then the phone rang. Caleb answered. Mr. Jones, Irma said. I understand you recently lost your job. Yes. At Cumulus Corporation, we consider our customers part of a family. Families support one another during difficult times. Caleb said nothing. That is why we are pleased to offer you employment. Esther lifted her head in the darkness. What did she say? Caleb covered the phone. They're offering me a job. Take it. Nate was crying. His voice had become weaker. "Oh, I'll take it," Caleb said. "Excellent. You will join our customer service team. Work materials will be delivered. Electricity and lighting will be available during your working hours." The paperwork arrived through a small delivery opening in the door. It was extensive. Caleb received a headset, a laptop, a company phone, and a thick training manual. His supervisor spoke to him through video calls, but never turned on his camera. "The job is simple," the supervisor explained. "Follow the script. Do not add your personality. Do not express personal opinions. You are only a voice, a warm, human voice delivering corporate wisdom." When Caleb received his first customer call, he took a deep breath. An older woman was crying on the line. "I think something is wrong with me," she said. "The walls of my apartment seem to be moving. I need a doctor. I think I'm losing my mind." Caleb opened the training manual. Tears filled his eyes. "I want to thank you for sharing your concern with me, Mrs. Kowalska," he read. "Here at Accumulus Corporation, we take all customer concerns seriously." The job did not reverse the compression. It only slowed it down. Caleb told himself that slowing the process was better than nothing. Perhaps that was all anyone could hope for in life. Not stopping the end, but delaying it. One day, Esther asked, "Do you think Nate will ever see real sunlight?" She and Caleb were lying beneath what remained of the dining table. The ceiling had already crushed the refrigerator. They now ordered food in small amounts because there was no place to store it. They had stopped buying clothes. They never left the apartment, so clothes were unnecessary. Soap and toothpaste became luxuries. Their main entertainment was calling Caleb's former employer's mental health line. No one ever answered. A damaged 30-second piece of Mozart played again and again while the system tried to connect them with a healthcare provider. They listened to it every day. It reminded them that music existed. It reminded them that somewhere outside, people still lived normal lives. "I don't know," Caleb answered. The apartment was no longer divided into rooms. The walls had destroyed that idea. There was only a shrinking amount of space filled with broken pieces of their former life. Caleb worked while lying on the floor. He bent his neck to see the laptop and forced his voice to remain calm. During working hours, the lights came on. Esther called those the daylight hours. She cooked on a small electric burner placed between broken tiles. She cared for Nate. She used pieces of wood, plastic, and fabric to create toys for him. Caleb spent every call sounding patient and understanding. When work ended, the lights disappeared. So did his patience. He became angry more often. He shouted. He cried. Sometimes he hit the floor or walls, though doing so only risked adding damage fees to their account. One day he broke down during a call. The customer had been begging him to stop the compression of her apartment. She said her husband was trapped under a cabinet. She said she could hear his ribs breaking. Caleb stopped reading the script. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry. They're doing it to us, too." The call was immediately ended by the company. Caleb's supervisor contacted him. First, the supervisor scolded him for breaking procedure. Then he allowed Caleb to speak. Caleb told him everything. The darkness, the shrinking space, Nate's hunger, Esther's anger, his fear. When Caleb finished, the supervisor was silent. "Caleb," he finally said, "I hear you." Caleb almost laughed. "You have been a dependable employee," the supervisor continued. "Because of your service, Accumulus Corporation is prepared to offer a solution." Later, Esther lay on her back with Nate resting on her chest. Caleb crawled toward her. "What?" she asked. "They have a euthanasia program." Esther stared at him. What did you say? They can provide a peaceful death. You want to kill yourself? No? Then what are you talking about? Caleb looked at Nate. Nate? Esther tightened her arms around the child. No. Listen to me. No? He's suffering. He cries constantly. He's hungry. He looks sick. He is not sick. His skin is pale. His eyes are hollow. He needs food and sunlight. We cannot give him those things. You're his father. That's why I'm saying this. You're a monster. I love him. You're broken. Caleb lowered his voice. They said it would be peaceful. They. A cumulus? You believe them? I don't know what else to believe. You have no dignity left. Caleb stared at her. I still have some. No, you don't. If not through their program, we could do it ourselves. Esther's face went still. What? We can't keep living like this. You want to kill us? I want to stop the suffering. You want to murder your family? I would do you first, so you wouldn't have to see anything. Esther held Nate tighter. A knife, Caleb continued. One quick cut. Maybe suffocation. I've heard suffocation can be peaceful. Stay away from us. I would never make you watch what happens to Nate. I would do myself last. Stay away. This is what a husband and father has to do. He reached toward her face. Esther struck his hand away. Before it is too late, Caleb begged. That night, Esther did not sleep. She watched Caleb in the darkness. Sometimes he whispered in his sleep. Sometimes he gasped and moved his arms as though fighting someone in a dream. Esther looked at Nate. She kissed his forehead. Then she crawled toward the remains of the kitchen. She searched through broken wood, plastic, and pieces of metal until she found a knife. She returned to Caleb. He was asleep on his side. She stabbed him. His eyes opened immediately. Shock appeared on his tired face. Esther stabbed again. He tried to speak, but blood filled his mouth. She did not know how to kill him gently. She only knew she had to make sure he died. Again and again, the knife entered his body. While she stabbed him, Esther hummed a song. Her grandmother had taught it to her when she was a child. She could not remember the words, only the melody. In her memory, she sat on a swing beneath a tree. Sunlight passed through the leaves. Wind touched her face. Her grandmother stood nearby, smiling. That life seemed impossibly far away. Hush, Esther whispered as Caleb struggled beneath her. It's over now. He tried to lift one hand. She stabbed him again. You coward, she said. You weak, broken coward. His breathing became wet and slow. I loved you once. Then he stopped moving. Silence filled the apartment. Esther's ears rang. Her hands and clothes were covered in blood. Nate was sleeping. She crawled back to him and placed him against her bare chest. She held him the same way she had held him after he was born, skin against skin. Her little boy, her angel. She remembered the good days, walks through the park, Nate's first smile, Caleb laughing at the dinner table, the digital windows showing sunlight. She even remembered the repeated piece of Mozart. Even that seemed beautiful now. Then the walls began moving faster. With Caleb dead, no employee was working inside the unit. The compression mechanism accelerated. The remaining space tightened around Esther and Nate. Caleb's body was slowly pushed closer. Esther became hot. Her head felt light. She struggled to breathe. But Nate's heart was still beating against her chest. His lungs continued working. She felt each weak breath. My sweet little angel, she thought. How could I regret anything? If regretting it meant wishing for a life in which you had never existed. The apartment continued shrinking until there was almost no space left. When the compression process was complete, Unit 7 no longer existed. What remained had been reduced to a small, sealed box shaped like a coffin. A machine inside Ramses II pulled the box upward through the building. It passed through pipes and mechanical shafts until it reached the surface. The building pushed it through a hidden opening in its smooth outer wall. The box dropped into a collection container. Later that day, 2 workers arrived in a truck. Their job was to collect compressed units and transport them elsewhere. One man was young and thin. The other was broad and muscular, with large arms and an old scar above one eye. They lifted the box together. Then they heard a sound from inside, a weak cry, wet, soft. The thin worker looked toward the truck. "Come on," he said. "Let's load it and leave." The muscular man did not move. "Did you hear that?" "I don't listen." "It sounds like a baby. You know the rules." The crying came again. The muscular worker lowered his side of the box. The thin man was forced to do the same. "What are you doing?" "There is something alive inside. We are not allowed to open the product." "Product?" "That is what it is called. It's a baby." "You don't know that." "I know what a baby sounds like." The thin worker stepped closer. "My family depends on this job. I have children to feed. I'm not losing my position because you think you heard something." The muscular man walked toward the truck. For a moment, the younger worker thought he had given up. Then the larger man returned with tools. "Open sesame," he said. He pushed a metal bar into the edge of the box. The other worker backed away. "You must have brain damage from boxing. I want no part of this." "Then leave. I'll tell them the truth." "Tell them." "I'll say this was your idea." "I don't care. They'll fire you." And the muscular worker stopped and looked at him. Sweat covered his face. "My whole life, people have called me a failure. I have no special skills. I know how to lift things, and I know how to punch people." He returned to the box. "If they fire me, then they fire me. You could lose your home. Maybe. You could lose everything. Maybe." The crying continued. The large worker forced the tool deeper into the seam. "If I walk away from this," he said, "then I deserve to lose everything." The thin worker shook his head. "You are the stupidest man I have ever known." "Then go." "Maybe the whole world deserves to be condemned." The thin man climbed into the truck. The muscular worker did not hear the engine start. He pulled at the top of the box until the seal broke. A terrible smell escaped. Inside were the crushed bodies of 2 adults. Between them lay a living baby. Nate was covered in blood and dust. His small hands protected his eyes from the daylight. His mouth opened as he cried and pulled in fresh air. The worker stared down at him. Then he reached inside. He lifted Nate carefully and held him against his chest. The child's crying grew stronger. The man looked at the tiny face and smiled. "A fighter," he whispered. Nate moved one small hand and wrapped his fingers around the man's thumb. "Just like me." Story 3. They keep chasing me, but none of them will tell me why. That was the first clear thought I had after waking up. My name is Nick. At least that is what I call myself now. I do not know whether it is my real name. It might belong to someone I once knew, someone I saw in a movie, or someone I passed on the street years ago. Maybe it came from some hidden part of my mind that still remembers more than I do. Whatever the reason, Nick was the only name that felt familiar. so I kept it. Yesterday morning, I woke up in a narrow alley behind a row of old buildings. My head was pounding so badly that I could barely open my eyes. Every beat of my heart sent another wave of pain through my skull. For several minutes, I did not move. I lay on the cold ground with one cheek pressed against the wet pavement, listening to water drip from a broken pipe somewhere above me. The alley smelled of old garbage, damp brick, and something sour that I could not identify. I slowly pushed myself up. The world spun around me, my stomach tightened, and I thought I was going to be sick. I leaned against the wall until the dizziness began to pass. The bricks were rough against my palm. That was when I noticed the blood. Both of my hands were covered in it. It had dried in dark red lines across my fingers and around my nails. There was more of it on my wrists and small spots on my arms. For one terrible moment, I thought I had been badly injured. I checked myself as quickly as I could. There were no deep cuts, no bullet wounds, no broken bones. My body was sore, and I found a small bruise near my right shoulder, but I felt mostly fine. The blood was not mine. I knew that immediately. I do not know how I knew. I just did. I wiped my hands against the sides of my clothing, but the fabric felt strange. I looked down and realized I was wearing a pale hospital gown. The back was partly open, and my bare legs were covered with dirt. I had no shoes. My feet were bruised and bleeding from several small cuts. I stared at the gown for a long time. I tried to remember putting it on. Nothing came. I tried to remember a hospital. Nothing. I tried to remember the night before. My home, my family, my job, my childhood. There was nothing inside my mind but darkness. The harder I searched for memories, the worse the pain in my head became. Then a face appeared. A woman. She had dark hair hanging around her face. Her eyes were wide with terror, and tears ran down both cheeks. Her mouth moved. She loved me. The image vanished. I gasped and pulled my hands away from my head. The alley returned around me. I stood there shaking. Who was she? Why was she screaming? Was she saying that she loved me? Or was she talking about someone else? Every time I tried to pull the memory closer, it broke apart. All I could see was her frightened face. All I could hear were those words. She loved me. I do not know how long I remained in the alley. It could have been 10 minutes or an hour. Eventually, I understood that I could not stay there. Someone might find me. I did not know whether that would be good or bad, but the blood on my hands made me fear the answer. I moved toward the opening at the end of the alley. The city outside was busy. Cars passed through the street. People walked along the sidewalks carrying coffee cups, bags, and phones. A bus stopped nearby, released several passengers, and then pulled away again. Everything looked normal. That made me feel worse. I stood barefoot in a hospital gown while ordinary people continued with their day as if nothing had happened. A few stared at me. Most looked away. I expected someone to call the police, but no one did. Perhaps people had learned not to involve themselves in the strange situations. I kept my head down and started walking. I had no idea where I was going. I only knew that I needed to leave the alley behind. As I crossed the street, I saw the first man in the suit. He stood near a newspaper stand, holding an open paper in front of his face. At first, he looked like any businessman on his way to work. Then I noticed that he was not reading. His eyes were fixed on me over the top of the page. I kept walking. He lowered his gaze. I told myself I was imagining it. My headache, the missing memories, and the blood had left me frightened. Anyone would have been suspicious in my condition. I glanced back after a few seconds. The man still held the paper in the same position. He had not turned a page. Farther down the street, another man in a dark suit stood beside a parked car. He appeared to be checking his phone, but his screen was black. A woman wearing a gray jacket pretended to study a store window. Her reflection showed that she was watching me. I slowed down. Across the road, another man lifted a cup to his mouth. He never drank from it. They were everywhere. Some were standing alone. Others were sitting on benches or waiting near cars. Each one appeared to be doing something ordinary. But none of them were truly doing anything. They were watching. My skin turned cold. I changed direction and walked faster. The man with the newspaper folded it calmly. The woman moved away from the store window. Two of the others stepped from the curb. They all started following me. I tried not to panic. Maybe they worked for the hospital. Maybe I had escaped after an accident or a medical procedure. But if that was true, why had no one called out to me? Why did they approach like hunters? Why were they dressed in suits? I turned down another street. Their footsteps followed. One of them spoke quietly into something hidden beneath his sleeve. I began to run. Behind me, someone shouted, "Stop!" I ran faster. My bare feet struck the pavement. Pain shot through my legs each time I landed, but fear kept me moving. People jumped out of the way. Someone cursed as I knocked a shopping bag from his hand. I did not stop. I looked over my shoulder. The men in suits were running after me. There were 4 of them now. The man with the newspaper was in front. His face showed no anger and no fear. He looked calm, almost bored, as if chasing terrified people through the city was part of his normal morning. I turned into a side street and nearly collided with a delivery truck. The driver blew the horn. I ran around the truck, crossed through traffic, and entered another alley. This one was wider than the place where I had awakened. Large trash bins stood against the walls. Empty boxes and black garbage bags were piled around them. I climbed behind the largest bin and pressed myself against the bricks. My chest burned. I covered my mouth with both hands to quiet my breathing. Footsteps entered the alley. I lowered my head. 2 men ran past my hiding place. A third stopped. For several seconds, there was no sound except the beating of my heart. I saw his polished shoes only a few feet away. He turned slowly. I was sure he had heard me. Then someone called from the far end of the alley. The man ran toward the voice. I remained behind the trash bin long after they were gone. When I finally moved, my legs were shaking so badly that I had to grip the wall. I did not understand what was happening. They knew who I was. That much was clear. I needed to find out before they caught me again. The word again came into my mind without warning. Had they caught me before? I searched for the memory. The woman's face appeared. Her hair was stuck to her cheeks. Blood covered the front of her shirt. She loved me. I pulled away from the wall and almost fell. This time the image had lasted longer. There had been blood. So much blood. I looked down at my hands. The dried stains seemed darker now. I scrubbed them against my gown until my skin turned red. But some of the blood remained around my nails. Hunger soon joined the fear. My stomach cramped so sharply that I had to bend forward. I could not remember the last time I had eaten. I checked the alley for food. There were half-empty containers near the garbage bags, but the smell made me turn away. I searched through the pockets of the gown, even though I knew it did not have any. No money, no phone, no identification, nothing. I stepped back toward the street. That was when I saw the poster. It was attached to a brick wall near the alley entrance. At first, I noticed only the large red words at the top. Escaped patient. Beneath them was a photograph. My photograph. I moved closer. The man in the picture had my face, but something about him felt different. His hair was shorter, and his eyes looked cold and empty. He stared into the camera as if he knew something terrible and had accepted it. Under the picture were more words. Call authorities immediately if seen. Do not approach. Subject is considered extremely dangerous. My mouth went dry. I touched the photograph. The paper shook beneath my fingers. It was me. There was no doubt. The escaped patient was me. But escaped from where? Why was I dangerous? Was the blood on my hands connected to it? I wanted to tear the poster down, but I could not stop staring at the picture. The man in it frightened me. He looked like a stranger wearing my face. Then I heard footsteps, slow, careful, coming from behind me. I turned. The man with the newspaper stood at the other end of the alley. 2 others appeared beside him. None of them looked out of breath. The first man spoke. Do not run. Who are you? I asked. He took a small step forward. You need to come with us. Why are you chasing me? No answer. What did I do? Again, no answer. I don't remember anything. Something changed in the man's expression. Not surprise, recognition. He had heard that before. I backed away. One of the other men moved to block the street. Tell me who I am, I demanded. We will explain everything. Explain it now. The man reached inside his coat. I turned to run. A sharp pain struck the side of my neck. I grabbed at it and felt a thin object buried in my skin. A needle. The alley tilted. My legs became weak. I tried to take another step, but my knee hit the ground. The man caught me before my head struck the pavement. The last thing I saw was the poster with my face. Then everything went black. I woke up in a small white room. For a moment, I thought I was blind. The walls, floor, ceiling, door, and bed were all the same pale color. A bright light shone from a panel above me. There were no windows, no clock, no furniture other than the narrow bed beneath me. I was still wearing the hospital gown, but someone had cleaned the blood from my hands. I rubbed my fingers together. They felt wrong without it. I sat up slowly. The headache had faded, but a dull pressure remained behind my eyes. I walked to the door and pulled the handle. Locked. I struck it with both fists. Open the door! No one answered. I hit it again. I need to know what's happening. My voice sounded small in the empty room. I returned to the bed and sat down. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. With no window or clock, there was no way to know. The silence was worse than the chase. At least while I was running, I had something to focus on. Now there was only my mind. I tried to remember again. A room, a woman, a man, a silver object in my hand, the woman screaming. She loved me! The memory disappeared before I could see more. I squeezed my eyes shut. Who are you? I whispered. The door clicked. The man with the newspaper entered. He no longer held it. Without the paper hiding part of his face, he looked older than I had thought. There were deep lines around his mouth and tiredness in his eyes. He closed the door behind him. I stood. What do you want? He did not answer at once. He studied me as though trying to decide how much danger I presented. You truly don't remember? He asked. No. Nothing at all? I woke up in an alley. And before that? Nothing? Your name? I think it's Nick. He pulled a chair from outside the room and sat opposite the bed. You think? I chose it. He nodded slowly. Your real name is Nicholas. The name struck me like a small electric shock. Not enough to create a memory, only enough to make my chest tighten. "Who are you?" I asked. "That is not important. It is important to me. I work for the facility you escaped from." "The hospital?" "It is not a hospital. The poster said I'm a patient. You are being held in a secure psychiatric institution." The words entered my mind slowly. Psychiatric institution. An asylum. I sat down. "Why?" The man watched my face. "Because of what you did." I looked at my hands. "What did I do?" He leaned forward. "You were in a relationship with a woman named Stephanie." The name caused the pain behind my eyes to grow. Stephanie. Dark hair, tears, blood. "How long?" I asked. 3 years. I waited. The man continued. "You met while working at a restaurant. You started dating soon after. According to friends and family, the relationship seemed normal at first." "At first? You became controlling." "No." "You checked her phone. You followed her when she went out. You accused her of lying." "I don't remember that." "I know." His calm voice made me angry. "You don't know me. I know your file. That is not the same thing." "No," he said. "It is not." He reached into his coat and removed a folder. He did not hand it to me. "One evening, you left work early," he said. "You had purchased a ring that afternoon." My breathing slowed. "A ring? You planned to propose?" A memory flashed. A small black box in my hand. My fingers shaking as I walked toward a door. Excitement, fear, hope. Then the image vanished. "I loved her," I whispered. The man's expression did not change. "You arrived at the apartment earlier than Stephanie expected." I knew what he was going to say before he said it. My stomach turned. "You found her with another man." The white room disappeared. For 1 second, I saw a bedroom. Clothes on the floor. A man standing beside the bed. Stephanie pulling a sheet around herself. Her face filled with shock. Then I was back in the room. "What was his name?" I asked. "Daniel." I closed my eyes. Something inside me began to shake. "You argued," the man said. "Daniel tried to leave. He shouldn't have been there." The words came out before I could stop them. The man noticed. "You went into the kitchen?" I could see it. White cabinets, a wooden block near the stove, my hand closing around a knife. "You took a large kitchen knife." "He shouldn't have been there," I repeated. "You returned to the bedroom and attacked him." "No." "You stabbed him 11 times." "No." "Most of the wounds were in the chest and abdomen." "Stop. He died before police arrived." I said stop. The man remained seated. "Stephanie tried to pull you away." The woman's face appeared in my mind again. But now I understood the words. She had not been screaming that she loved me. She had been screaming that she loved him. "She loved me," I shouted. The man looked at me with something close to pity. "No, Nicholas." I stood so quickly that the bed frame scraped across the floor. "She loved me. She told you that she loved Daniel." My head filled with noise, a scream. A knife striking flesh. Someone begging. My own breath coming fast and hard. Stephanie crying, "I love him." That was what she had said. Not she loved me. She loved him. The memory had been broken, twisted, and turned around inside my damaged mind. I pressed both hands against my ears. The man continued speaking. "You stabbed her as well." I shook my head. "She begged you to stop." "No." "You cut her across the arms when she tried to protect herself." "No." "You stabbed her twice in the side." "She was alive." "She was when the police entered." The bedroom door breaking open, men shouting, a weapon pointed at me. The knife slipping from my fingers, Stephanie lying on the carpet, blood beneath her body, her eyes open. "She went to the hospital," the man said. I looked at him. "You said she was alive." "She died during surgery." My legs gave way. I fell onto the bed. "She lost too much blood." The man's voice seemed to come from far away. I stared at the white floor. The blood had been hers. Some of it, at least. The rest belonged to Daniel. The stains on my hands. The face in my memory. The poster. All of it began to connect. I did not want it to. "Oh, what happened to me?" I asked. "You were arrested. And then?" "You were charged with 2 murders. I don't remember the trial." "You were found guilty and sentenced to life in prison." I looked toward the door. "Then why was I in an asylum?" "You began showing signs of severe mental illness soon after sentencing." "What kind? Paranoia? Hallucinations? Violent outbursts? Long periods where you did not appear to know who or where you were?" "That's why I can't remember." "Possibly. Possibly. There may be more than one reason." I looked at him. "What does that mean?" The man closed the folder. "You were transferred from prison to a secure psychiatric facility." "And I escaped?" He did not answer immediately. The silence told me that the story was not finished. "What happened?" I asked. "You were being moved between facilities after attacking another patient." "I killed him?" "No. He survived." Something like relief passed through me, though I did not deserve it. The man continued. "During the transfer, you managed to remove one of your restraints. How? We are still investigating." "You don't know?" "You attacked the officer seated beside you. You took his weapon." I stared at him. "How many?" The man's face became colder. "How many officers did I kill?" "3. The room felt smaller. You injured 2 others and escaped from the transport vehicle." "I don't remember." "You fled into the city." "And then I woke up in the alley." "Yes." I looked at the clean skin of my hands. The blood had not all come from the apartment. Some of it had been fresh, the officers. Perhaps the hospital gown belonged to the facility. Perhaps I had worn it during the transport. Perhaps I had run through the streets with a stolen gun and blood on my body until something happened to my memory. "Where is the gun?" I asked. "We recovered it near the alley." I let out a breath. "Why didn't you just tell me all of this when you found me?" "You were considered armed and dangerous." "I didn't have the gun." "We did not know that." "You could have called out." "We did." I remembered the first shout. "Stop." Nothing else. "Why were you dressed like that?" "We were trying not to cause panic." "So you followed me like criminals?" "We were attempting to capture a man who had already killed several people." His words were sharp, but his voice remained quiet. I lowered my head. "I don't feel like that person." The man looked at me for several seconds. "That does not mean he isn't you." I hated him for saying it. I hated the truth inside the words even more. "Can memories come back?" I asked. "Yes." "All of them?" "Possibly." "The word again?" "Always possibly." "What happens now?" "You will remain here." "For how long?" He stood. "That is no longer my decision." He carried the chair toward the door. "Wait." He stopped. "Did Stephanie say anything before she died?" The man did not turn around. "According to the medical report, she was unconscious when she arrived." "So she never spoke?" "Not after the attack." I wanted him to say something else. I wanted a final message, an apology, a sign that she had forgiven me, a lie that would let me believe some small part of what we had was real. The man opened the door. What about Daniel? I asked. What about him? Did she really love him? The man finally looked back at me. I don't know. Then he walked out. The door locked behind him. I sat alone on the bed. The light above me hummed softly. I studied my hands. They had killed 5 people. Daniel, Stephanie, 3 officers. 5 lives ended because of these fingers. Yet they looked ordinary. The same hands that had held Stephanie's when we walked together. The same hands that had cooked dinner for her. The same hands that had carried the ring I planned to offer her. I tried to remember the good moments. Her laughing in the kitchen. Her sleeping beside me. Her head resting on my shoulder. For a while, nothing came. Then one memory appeared. We were sitting in a small cafe. Rain covered the windows. Stephanie was smiling at me. She reached across the table and touched my hand. "I love you, Nick," she said. The image felt warm, safe, real. But I no longer trusted my own mind. Perhaps the memory had never happened. Perhaps I had changed her words again. Perhaps she had been speaking to someone else. The light flickered. I looked toward the door. For a moment, I thought I heard footsteps outside. Then a soft voice came from the corner of the room. "You killed me." I stood. No one was there. The voice came again. Stephanie's voice. "You killed me." I covered my ears. "I'm sorry." "You killed me." "I didn't remember." "You remembered enough." Her face appeared against the white wall. Not like a shadow. Not like a person standing there. More like an image trapped beneath the paint. Her eyes were open. Blood ran down her neck. "She loved me," I whispered. The face smiled sadly. Then it vanished. I do not know whether she was truly there. The man said I had suffered from hallucinations. Maybe my mind created her because the truth was too heavy. Or perhaps death does not stop people from returning when they have something left to say. I lay down on the narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. The locked door remained closed. Somewhere beyond the walls, the men in suits were probably watching through a hidden camera. They had chased me because I was dangerous. They had been afraid of me. Maybe they still were. The strange thing was that I had spent the whole morning believing I was the victim. I had been frightened by the men following me. I had felt hunted, trapped, confused. But Stephanie must have felt all of those things before she died. She had watched me enter that bedroom with a knife. She had seen the person she once trusted become something else. Maybe she begged me because she still believed some part of me could hear her. Maybe that part had already disappeared. The memories continued returning during the night. Not in order. Not clearly. A scream. The black box with the ring. Daniel raising his hands. The knife. A neighbor shouting behind a wall. A police officer falling inside the transport vehicle. Running through rain. Blood drying on my fingers. Each image arrived like a broken piece of glass. I wanted them to stop. At the same time, I needed to see all of them. I needed to know whether the man had told me the truth. Deep down, I already knew he had. People do not invent that much blood. They do not hang posters across a city for an innocent man. They do not send teams to hunt him unless they know what he is capable of. By morning, I was sitting on the edge of the bed again. There was a metal tray on the floor near the door. Someone must have pushed it through a hidden opening while I was lost inside my memories. The tray held bread, fruit, and a plastic cup of water. I was hungry, but I could not eat. I kept staring at my hands. I thought about the man in the photograph, the cold version of me, the dangerous patient. Perhaps he knew the truth all along. Perhaps the memory loss was only another way of escaping. If I did not remember Stephanie, I did not have to feel guilty. If I did not know my name, I could pretend to be someone new, someone innocent, someone being chased for no reason. But the past had followed me into the white room. It had followed me into the darkness behind my eyes. It wore Stephanie's face. They say I killed her. I know now that I did. But when I close my eyes, I still see the ring in my hand before I see the knife. I still remember believing that we had a future. I remember the life I thought I was about to begin. Then I remember her with him. The shock, the betrayal, the moment something inside me broke. None of that excuses what I did. I understand that, at least I think I do. Still, a part of me keeps searching for a reason that makes the pain easier to carry. A part of me keeps asking why she did it, why she smiled at me, why she let me believe, why she waited until I came home with a ring in my pocket to destroy everything I thought was real. They say I killed her. Maybe they are right. But I think she killed what little was left of me first. Story 4. Ralston would still be alive if I had never found that post online. That is the simplest way to explain it. He would probably be sitting in his apartment right now, drinking cheap beer and complaining about work. We would still be texting each other stupid videos. We would still be arguing about whether the abandoned grain mill outside town was really haunted. Instead, I am sitting here with every light in my house turned on, listening to something wet move through the walls, all because I read that there was something underneath Pollinacre's swamp. I do not even remember how I found the post. It was late at night, and I had been searching through one of those old local mystery forums, the kind of place where people discuss missing hikers, strange lights over empty roads, and buildings that are supposed to be cursed. Most of it was nonsense. A blurry photograph of a deer became a demon. A broken radio tower became proof of government experiments. Every strange sound in the woods was either a ghost or some creature no one had ever seen clearly. I read those stories for entertainment. Ralston did too. We had been friends since high school, and we both enjoyed exploring places where we were not supposed to be. Old houses, empty factories, sealed-off tunnels, forgotten cemeteries. We never found anything truly frightening. Mostly, we found broken glass, graffiti, dead animals, and groups of teenagers smoking weed. That should have been enough. We should have understood that some places are abandoned for good reasons, even when the reason is only rot, disease, or unstable ground. The post about Pollinacre's swamp had no pictures and almost no details. It had been written by someone using a name made of random numbers. The writer claimed there was a chamber below the swamp, older than any settlement in the area. He said it could only be reached by digging through a weak section of the swamp floor. According to him, the water did not sit on solid earth. It rested over something hollow. He wrote that the old families in the area knew about it. He said they avoided certain parts of the swamp and had done so for generations. He mentioned strange disappearances and animals found empty inside, as though everything soft had been pulled out through their mouths. The last line of the post was the only part that stayed in my mind. Do not open what the swamp has sealed. I sent the link to Ralston. He replied less than a minute later. When are we going? I should have laughed and forgotten about it. Instead, I told him we could go Saturday. We spent the next few days planning like we were preparing for some serious expedition. We bought cheap scuba masks, air tanks, gloves, ropes, waterproof flashlights, 2 shovels, and a post-hole digger. Neither of us had any real experience diving in swamp water. Ralston had taken a short scuba course during a vacation years earlier, and I had gone diving once in clear ocean water with an instructor beside me. That was the full amount of our training. It did not matter to us. We told ourselves the water would not be deep. We would stay close together. We would only look around for a few minutes and leave if anything felt dangerous. Those are the kinds of promises people make when they have already decided to do something stupid. Pollinacre's swamp was about an hour and a half from town. It stretched for miles beside an old highway that few people used anymore. There had once been a logging community nearby, but it had vanished long before either of us was born. Only a few rotting buildings remained near the northern edge. We chose a place where the swamp came closest to the road. There was enough space to park the truck without blocking traffic, though no cars passed while we were there. The sky was cloudy that afternoon. There was daylight, but very little sun. The clouds covered everything in a dull gray shade that made the trees look flat and lifeless. The moment I stepped out of the truck, the smell hit me. Mud, rotting leaves, standing water, and something sour underneath it all. The whole place smelled like a huge animal had died beneath the ground and had been slowly decomposing for years. Ralston noticed my expression and laughed. "Still want to find your secret cave?" he asked. "It was your idea to come. It was your post." That was true. We loaded our gear into packs and started walking. The swamp was about half a mile from the highway, but reaching it took longer than expected. The ground was soft and uneven. Roots caught our boots. Thorny plants pulled at our clothes. The insects were unbearable. Mosquitoes followed us in clouds, landing on every piece of uncovered skin. Small flies flew into our eyes and ears. Something bit the back of my neck hard enough to make me slap myself. Ralston kept complaining that we were being drained before we even reached the water. I told him to stop whining. I wish I had let him complain. I wish I remembered more of what he said during that walk. His voice had been so normal. He was excited, joking, alive. Now, whenever I try to remember him, I hear the wet sound of something moving under his skin. We reached the swamp shortly after 3 in the afternoon. The water was dark brown and almost completely still. Thin trees grew from it at strange angles. Their roots twisted through the surface like fingers. Green plants covered some areas, but most of the water looked thick and empty. There were no birds. That bothered me. We had heard insects, frogs, and distant animal sounds during the walk, but near the water, everything became quieter. Ralston said it was probably because we had disturbed them. We put on our gear at the edge. The air tanks felt heavy. The masks were uncomfortable. The mud pulled at our boots as soon as we stepped into the water. Within a few feet, the water rose above our knees. A few steps farther, it reached our waists. The bottom was soft and unstable. Every time I moved, my foot sank deep into black mud. Rotten branches scraped my legs. Once, something smooth brushed against my ankle, and I nearly shouted. Ralston told me it was probably a fish. I never saw any fish. We moved slowly toward the area marked on the map from the post. The directions were unclear, but the writer had mentioned 3 narrow trees growing together and a fallen trunk pointing east. It took us almost an hour to find anything that matched. The 3 trees stood in deeper water near a patch of open swamp. A long, dead trunk rested nearby, half submerged and covered in moss. Ralston raised his mask and smiled. This has to be it. I looked around. It did match the description, but that did not prove anything. The swamp was full of similar trees and fallen logs. We could have been in completely the wrong place. We should have decided we had wasted enough time. Instead, Ralston put his mask back on and lowered himself beneath the surface. The water swallowed him immediately. I could not see him, even though he was only a few feet away. That was how dark it was. His rope moved through my hands as he searched the bottom. Every few seconds, he pulled it once to show that he was fine. After several minutes, he came back up. There's a clear spot down there, he said. No roots. Feels like flat ground. I told him that could mean nothing, he said. Or it could mean we found it. We took the tools from our packs. Going underwater with the post-hole digger was difficult. It was heavy and awkward, and the water made every movement slow. Ralston went down first. I followed. The water was so dark that my flashlight only lit a small brown cloud in front of me. Mud floated everywhere. I could barely see Ralston's hand when he waved it near my face. We felt our way along the bottom. Most of the swamp floor was covered with roots, branches, weeds, and soft layers of dead plants. Then my hand touched something smooth. It was a circle of packed mud, maybe 4 feet wide. No roots grew through it. No plants covered it. The ground felt firmer there. Ralston pointed at it, then at the post-hole digger. We started digging. It was exhausting work. Each time we pushed the blades into the mud, the ground seemed to hold them. Pulling the tool back up required both of us. The hole filled immediately with dark water and loose dirt. We could not see how deep we had gone. We kept working. Every few minutes, we rose to the surface to rest. Ralston became more excited each time. He said the bottom felt different beneath the mud. Harder, like clay or stone. I started to believe him. That was the worst part. If I had remained doubtful, maybe I would have stopped us. Instead, curiosity took over. There really was something down there. We returned underwater and continued digging. The hole became deep enough that Ralston could put most of his arm into it. He felt around inside, then looked at me and raised his thumb. We pushed the post-hole digger down again. The blades broke through something. I felt it before I heard it. A sudden vibration moved through the tool and into my arms. Then came a dull pop. The mud beneath us dropped. A stream of water rushed into the hole. Ralston jerked backward. For a moment, we both simply stared. The hole was draining the swamp. Water spiraled toward it, pulling mud, leaves, and small branches down. The current grew stronger by the second. We rushed to the surface. What the hell was that? I asked. Ralston pulled off his mask, breathing hard. We opened it. The water around us had begun to turn. A small whirlpool formed over the hole. We should have left immediately. Instead, we stood there watching. Ralston seemed amazed. He said we might drain enough water to reveal whatever was beneath the swamp. I pointed out that we had no idea how large the space was. The entire swamp might begin collapsing. He said that was impossible. Neither of us knew enough to say what was possible. We pushed the 2 shovels into the hole, using them to widen it. The moving water pulled at the blades. Mud broke away around them. We worked like surgeons opening a wound, forcing the hole wider and wider. More water disappeared. The whirlpool deepened. Dead leaves circled around our bodies. Branches scraped against us. The current pulled at our legs. We should have brought a camera, Ralston said. Then his expression changed.